Hello, my name is Dean Contover, and this is the History Show. Today we have Ethan Smith. He was a United States Marine from 2010 to 2014, and he was in Afghanistan twice. So we're going to talk to him about his journey through the Marine Corps. Marines are the elite forces in the United States Army, or that's the perception. Is that correct?
Throughout the United States services, not just the Army.
Okay. And the Marine comes under the Navy, right? It's
yes, Department of the Navy.
Navy, right. And Ethan went into basic training. We're going to talk about basic training in the Marines. And where'd you go to basic training, by the way?
Parris Island, South Carolina.
Parris. How long was that for? Do you remember? How long?
13 weeks.
13 weeks.
A little over 3 months.
What do you remember about basic training?
I remember that when they told me that it was going to be a different world, that it was going to be a shock, I remember thinking that was one thing, and then when I got there, the reality of what they meant was completely different. The shock was a lot more intense than I had anticipated it to be. And intense in a different way. I just didn't expect a grown person to be as intense in my face without being physical. That was...
that was a wake-up call.
It was a different type of shock.
Yeah.
Yes, because when someone gets in your face, it's that fight or flight, like, what do I do? And now they train you to stay in there and not take it, but how to adjust to that type of situation. It's that in itself is a shock.
Right.
So I didn't quite understand what they meant until I was there.
Did they cut your hair?
Yes, first day.
Give you shots?
Yes, there's a whole bunch of shots that they give you during the first receiving. It's the first couple of days.
Right.
And in that time frame, they keep you awake. And when you go through medical, you have already had your haircut, and you're wearing sneakers and your uniforms, your camis, which is your camouflage uniform. And there's just a line, we call it a round robin, it's a wagon wheel, where they just pump you in the arm and you just walk in a straight line, and they get you on either side, and you just go around in a big circle in a room.
This is preventive medicine.
Yes.
Right.
They also give you some in your butt. They call it the peanut butter shot, I believe, and it just, as soon as it goes in, it just feels like a Charlie horse.
Punched you.
Right in the ass, and that's fun. Then after that, they PT'd us to try to get the work in, and I heard about this, that they're going to run you and stuff, but right. Getting a little shot in the ass and then have to do jumping jacks in a sand pit, then go for a nice little run, and you're just uncomfortable in a lot of ways, and you're sweaty, and you can't breathe, and you start thinking, I don't want to do this. And then I want to quit. And that's the first couple of days. And you're like, oh, this is...
You get homesick?
Not so much homesick, but just, yes, homesick. That you want to go home and you want to be around the people you love and their family.
And food.
That food. Oh, boy, there was one gentleman I became good friends with, A.J. Cavill. He had bearing like no other. But this guy came up to me, he's like, hey, do you want to talk about food? Just to have a camaraderie, because that's something that kept us in common. But he whispered it because the hunger was so deep in a lot of people that they would get angry. No, I don't want to talk about that. I'm going to get pissed off. So I'm just thinking about food now. I'm even more hungry. But my mouth is even watering thinking about the crazy recipes we gave each other like old housemates. That was enjoyable. And we had to slip each other notes within our little scrapbook we have for taking notes called I believe it's Green Monster, as the nickname goes. And that's just a notebook they give you to take notes, because the education you get in boot camp is unbelievable. The history, the knowledge.
How many weeks did you say? 12? Did you say?
It's 13 weeks total of training.
Yeah, you learn a lot in 13 weeks.
A lot of college type classes. You get 13 college credits just for graduating boot camp.
Right.
Physical attributes and all that stuff, the training that they put you through. It's college level.
What weapon did you qualify with?
In boot camp, it was the M16A2, which is an M16, the standard U.S. military AR platform. And that is a good weapon. It's heavy, and holding it straight out with your elbows locked out, at shoulder height, elbows locked out, you gain some respect for that weapon. And
or any weapon.
Any weapon, but specifically that one, and why that weapon is so important to you as a person. It is, it's a very unique thing when it becomes, you don't have to name it. That's a thing that we all did.
You're married to it.
We're married to it, but it's the same thing as a NATO phonetic alphabet in boot camp. They didn't teach us that. We just kind of figured it out because if they taught us it, then they'd have to do it their way, and their way is painful. So it's going to be taught to me either way. How I actually learn and retain that information is up to me. They're going to throw it at me. They're going to drill it to me once or twice. If they have to do it more than that, it's going to be painful. Right. So instead of doing that, how about I learn it? So when they do yell it at me, it's just re-information of something I already know. That became the mentality too late in boot camp. By the time I figured that out, I was like, oh, I wish I had put that 2 and 2 together 2 months ago. Boot camp would have been a lot easier for me.
Yeah.
But at least I got the knowledge.
Were there any people kicked out of boot camp? And what happened to them?
Well, there was many different reasons. When I joined, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in effect. So sexual orientation was an issue, but that got repealed September 21st, 2011. It might be the 20th. Don't quite remember. But if I do remember, it was a Thursday. I was in Korea when that had got repealed, so open to whatever sexual orientation you please.
Right.
But while I was in boot camp in 2010, we had, in our company, we had somebody that had got dropped from a previous company during training, one that had already come before us.
They call that rotating
yes,
because you got injured or something like that and it held you back.
Or getting dropped from your platoon to another platoon in another company because it comes in cycles.
Right.
The training does. And he had gotten dropped because he had said that he was homosexual to try to get out of it.
Right.
Out of the Marines.
A lot of people have done that over the last 50 years.
Yep. And
in the military.
Once you're in boot camp, you understand why they've done that. It's difficult to a different type of level. It really crushes your soul. By the end of it, you feel more of an ant than you do as an individual.
Interesting.
And
I never heard that terminology, but that's interesting.
Well, if you think of how an ant works in a colony,
I understand
it does what it's told.
It makes sense.
In the Marines, we had a saying, it does what it's told. You know, from Silence of the Lambs, there was a whole bunch of very funny quotes that are messed up that people use in a day-to-day life. It does what it's told, or it gets the hose again type thing. And or thinking of us in a platoon or in Marines in a gathering as cattle, like sheep. And when they're like, all right, you're here, now we have to go over here as a mass group, people should start mooing or making sheep noises because it's funny.
Right.
But if you think about it, that's kind of deep and depressing. But those things are usually the funniest. And if you can laugh at something that's morbid and you can get other people to laugh at that same thing, even as you're smiling, I can imagine you're thinking of a few good stories, it doesn't become as hard. It becomes easier, and that camaraderie, yes, that's the one. That gets built even more. And there's some people in boot camp that I'm like, wish I could find him. I'd like to have a beer with him or grab a meal or just catch up, because I remember the things we went through. That was something that was built, and that was only a first taste of the military. And with this first group of people, that was fun.
Now, were there women in basic training? They weren't mingled in with you, but did they have women platoons or companies?
Yes, in the Marines, only in Parris Island do females train. There's 2 boot camps. San Diego and Parris Island.
Right.
Parris Island is open to females as well. They have their own company, and 4th Battalion. And no, the only time that we see them was on the rifle range. We would pass them because we would share the chow hall. They would have one side, we would have the other side. And when we went to the pool for swim qualification, and Marines are aquatic.
Right.
And we didn't interact. We had our pool time, however the long the schedule was. And then they had the second half of the session or the day. So they would see us come out of the pool outside, and then it was an indoor building, and we see them go in. But amazing.
Was there any interaction after in the evenings with them?
Nope.
No.
That wasn't. We didn't interact with females until MCT, Marine Combat Training, which happens after boot camp.
Okay.
The way the training cycle goes is boot camp for the initial 13 weeks, Then you have what's called boot leave. It's a nickname term. You have mandatory leave that they give you after boot camp. Usually it's 10 days. And that is to help you get reacclimated from extreme training where you are now becoming an ant back into the society.
Right.
Because if you just keep that training cycle, you're going to fall into this.
Now, in basic training, everybody's considered a rifleman, right, in the Marines?
Once you graduate the rifle range.
Okay.
So that is a different. If you unk, which is you don't qualify, you don't hit the mark, if you unk a certain amount of times, they'll kick you out of the Marines. Because if you're not a rifleman, what's the point of being in the Marines?
Right.
Every Marine is a rifleman. And if you can't qualify on that rifle, you're not a rifleman, you're not a Marine.
In the Army, it was BOLO.
Bolo?
No, yeah, that's what they called it.
I've heard that term. What does that stand for?
I don't know. It just says you don't qualify. You're not qualifying as a marksman. What did you qualify as with a M16?
In boot camp, I qualified as a marksman, which is the lowest level,
lowest,
which
right.
It means I didn't shoot very well.
Yeah.
The other times that I shot in the service, I qualified as a sharpshooter, which is the mid-level, which is about average. And then expert is somebody that is very good at shooting.
Right.
But no, I never made expert.
When you were at basic training, were there any guys out of basic training that went into embassy duty?
Not.
How was that done?
Funny, the embassy duty is also called, what was it? Marine Security Guard, MCG. Oh, I can't remember the acronym.
Okay,
but
yeah.
The embassy duty is what I wanted after I got in the Marines. I joined for no real reason.
Right.
I didn't have a rhyme. I just, hey, this is a thing to do.
Right.
Because that makes sense. But once I was in, I was like, wait, we do embassy duty. That sounds something that I would love to do, to be the physical ambassador and the gate guard to an American embassy.
Right. Every embassy has Marines.
Exactly, and I was like, that's not only going to fill me as a sense of pride, but also something I can do and I can do well. This might be my thing.
Right.
And but you just can't go out of. That isn't a job in so-called MOS. It isn't a job that they have in the military fresh out of boot camp.
I
see.
see.
You sign your contract. You have, all right, I'm going to do this job for this many years.
Right.
But after you're in, your contract says after 2 years you can do anything you want. You can switch, and that's called lat move. You're laterally moving to another job within the company of the Marines. So by that time, we had to start our workup for our first deployment. And I was like, well, a combat deployment to Afghanistan, or do I put in my package for embassy duty, which is 50-50. So I was like, I'm going to do the deployment. Not that I even had a choice, but that was where my mindset was.
Right,
I'll try this embassy duty afterward.
Right.
And then during my deployment, I talked to a career planner, the guy who helps set you up. All right, where's your orders going to? Where are you going to next? After this station, after this
duty station.
Are you staying in? What's your military career planning? And he's the guy who helps you with the paperwork, because the military is government bureaucrats. It's paperwork up the ass.
Right.
So he
it's all
said,
digital now.
Say again?
It's all digital now.
Even still, you still have to sign like 40 stacks, and that's got to get scanned. But he told me that I didn't have enough time on my contract, because my contract was 4 years. And at that point, I had somewhere around 20 some odd months left on my contract. And to do embassy duty is considered a B billet, A, B, C. So it's your A billet is your assignment, your job. So my A job, my primary job, and then it would become a secondary job. So even though I'm a truck driver, I don't drive trucks anymore, I guard an embassy.
Right.
That's my job. My first job is A. So I am now multi-tiered. And to do a B billet, you need to do it for 2 years straight, or 3 years, I believe it is.
Oh.
So the Marines and other services, they're like, hey, we'll extend your contract. That way you don't have to re-enlist for another 4 years, but you extend it by a certain amount of months.
Right. Oh.
My extension for that amount of months ran out at, I think, like 2 months, 2 or 3 months. So he's like, we can extend you, but it's still not enough time. So you have to re-enlist. So the way that it adds up is I would have had to re-enlist to do something,
I see.
and then would have got stuck for 2 years doing something that I might not have liked as much. And at this point in time, I had not liked the Marines. They
Oh, okay.
It is one of those things where, you get screwed by the system type deal. You blame somebody else, but it's like I went in so naive, and I was naive until even now. There's a lot I don't know that I experienced. That it just left such a bad taste in my mouth. It feels like I got the short end of too many sticks. The worst part is I was decent at it. I wasn't superb, and I wasn't the low class, but I was.
You were average.
I was a little bit above average, but I never tried.
Right.
I never applied myself, and the older I get, I'm like, well, imagine if I did actually apply 100%. Where could I?
It's like high school. If you applied yourself in high school.
Exactly, but the thing with the service is I didn't have that passion or that
gun ho.
Not for my job, for other parts of it, but what really sucked all the fun out was the people that's been in too long or that give you that give the orders. Not that they weren't fun or anything, it's just their style of leadership, of getting things done. It has to be conformed to the way the military is, which is unconformed to individuality, which, you know, if you don't have a passion for it, what gives you that passion? They took that out. So if you don't like what you do, you're not going to be good at it type deal. So
let's get back to basic training. At the end of basic training, was there a parade, and do they award you the?
Yes. After you complete the crucible, which is your final test.
Crucible, is that what they call it?
That is the final stage of boot camp training.
Right.
With that, it's I think 3 days. You hike somewhere like 90 miles or something like that. It's very intense. You get very little sleep, very little food, and you put together everything that you've trained to do. There's different land navigation courses, for example. That's how they train you, and now this is a point to put it to the test. Wow. I was in my platoon. Somebody broke their ribs during land navigation.
Wow.
Yeah, even though
it does happen, accidents like that do happen.
There was a gentleman in boot camp that fell off of one of the towers about 20 some odd feet and landed on his back and broke his spine.
Wow.
That was bad.
Right.
I was in boot camp in the spring, and towards the end of the spring, it got so hot that people kept going down from dehydration. And it's called the Black Flag Training Stop, where there's so many people that are getting injured or so many people that are in the medical bay, they don't have enough beds. So they stop training so people will stop getting injured so that the beds can clear out. It does happen.
I mean, injuries do happen, accidents do happen, vehicle accidents do happen.
Exactly.
These things do happen in the military. You know, the actual, some of them are combat related and some of them are not. What I wanted to ask is this, in regards to the Marine Corps, did you have a parade at the end? I mean, was there a parade?
Yes, after, like I was saying, after you complete all that, you are now, complete the crucible, you are now considered a Marine. And after your graduation, there is a ceremony, which is you're part of it. You're part of your own parade to graduate.
Right.
And they march you around the parade deck, and all boot camp, the drills that you've been practicing, you now get to perfect it. And the choreography at a Marine Corps graduation boot camp is unbelievable. Once in a while, I'll just YouTube it just to see a row of people exactly moving, and the minuscule amount that they're off, you can't detect it unless you're right there with them.
Right.
But it is unbelievable, the choreography that final drill, as it's called, will have these people marching with. It is a sight to see and to hear too.
Let's talk about the dress uniform. Tell me about the pictures that you take with the dress uniform.
It's funny.
I saw you smile, so I know what you're thinking.
It's funny
you know that I know.
Yeah.
What do you think? Go ahead.
When I was a kid, I saw my dad's picture, his army picture. And he used to say, the only thing in this picture that's real is the hat, because he had a uniform on and there was a flag in the background. And same thing when I took mine, the only thing that was real is a hat. The dress blue uniform that you take in boot camp is a shell, and it velcros in the back, so you just slip into it and you put your hat on, and the background is a flag, but it's a background. It doesn't move, it's a picture. And you sit there, they take a picture, they take another picture, and they tell you to get up. The whole process takes less than a minute, and you're standing there all day. And you're hot and you're sweaty, and then they bring you in an AC room, so you're shivering, and then they take this picture, and it feels like they're intentionally trying to make it uncomfortable. And my entire lower half was covered in dry sand because I was sweating from being outside and doing jumping jacks, push-ups.
But it didn't matter.
It didn't matter because from my neck up, the only part of the picture was fine. And I was just it was horrible. And I'm like, this whole thing is just a
charade.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, dog and pony show to its extreme.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was.
Because that's what every Marine tells me, that same story.
And I have the pictures side by side at my house that my wife had done as a gift for me, which is unbelievable. It's a beautiful memorial.
Right.
And every time I look at it, I'm just like, that's funny, the reality behind that picture.
Yeah, it's a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
You know, something happens to them and they have a picture of them in the Marines and they look great.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, it's just one of those things. Okay, back to reality. You get out of basic training, what happens?
In what regard?
You got orders to go?
Yes. So in boot camp, they even give you a class on this, on how to go somewhere with orders and what to dress and where to dress, because so many people have showed up and like, I don't know what to do, because
that's right. You're kind of left in the leash. You go home after basic training in some cases, and then you have to report to this base, you know, on this particular day.
And you got to plan that out right, because they give you orders, which is also itinerary for travel, but you know, plane leaves at noon. What time do I get to the airport? Nobody explains this to you. And most of these people are young enough where they've never done this before.
That's correct.
Or they've never done this before on their own, so they're very unsure about it. And now you're a Marine. You have the sense of pride. You have the sense of responsibility. You're supposed to know with nobody teaching you. That's a very scary thing. Especially when you're the face or the ambassador of an organization such as the military.
Right.
So they give you these classes on what to do, but you brain dump it almost immediately. But you show up in your service alpha uniform, the green one with your ribbons on one side, your little, we call it the piss cover hat, because it looks like a latrine. And honestly, I think that's the sharpest uniform that we have. I just
You don't like the dress uniform?
I do. I'd like the dress blues, but it feels like they're. Maybe it's just me. They feel very, very flashy.
Okay.
Which is great, but it's ceremonial. But I think on the day-to-day wear of, like yourself, you're wearing a blazer. The service alpha is pretty much the same thing.
Right.
And I like the look of it myself. But you show up in orders with that, and with your itinerary and your orders to wherever you're going, airport, the bus stations.
Now, do they give you half price in the ticket, or how's that?
They pay for your ticket.
Oh, they pay for your ticket.
The only time that I was required to pay for my own travel is when I'm taking my own travel time, which is called leave, which is the same thing as your vacation time.
I see, right.
Which is another reason why I never left Japan when I was stationed over there, because a plane ticket was about $2,000 round trip. And I never had that much money saved up at one time.
You were in Okinawa or Japan?
Okinawa is in Japan, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, but
yes.
You were on the island, okay.
Yep, I was on the island of Okinawa. That's a whole different world over there.
Okay.
It's even a whole different world from the Japanese main island. People from the main island come on vacation.
From what I understand, I won't tell you what I heard about Okinawa and the people in Okinawa in comparison to people in Japan proper. But
yes, very much so.
But let's go. But we're kind of going off.
Sorry.
I want to know your training now. You get the orders and you go into what training or what base do you go to? From
boot camp, you go to. Depending on your MOS, if you're infantry related, which is the largest job by personnel, by volume, by what they really, I think what they do is infantry. And that goes to SOI, School of Infantry, which is in the same location as MCT. It's on Camp
Is it Paris Island?
No. From there, from Paris Island, once you graduate, you're done with South Carolina.
Okay.
Then the next training evolution for the East Coast, because it's east or west of the Mason-Dixon line, is North Carolina. Fort
Lejeune, Camp Lejeune?
Camp Lejeune, but in Camp Lejeune, the training base is called Camp Geiger.
Okay.
And in the Camp Geiger, there's School of Infantry, there's also Marine Corps, MCT, Marine Combat Training. Marine Combat Training is offered to people who are not infantry related. So if you have a job other than infantry, you'll go to MCT, including, I believe, at the time, all females, because they didn't have females in the infantry when I was in.
Right.
And that's where you get your first interaction of mixing genders within platoons, within companies.
Right, I get it.
Training, so you start to.
You think a woman should be in infantry?
I don't see an issue with it. The issue I see is a human being, regardless of gender orientation, doesn't matter. If you cannot perform the task at hand, you're not you are not that person for that job.
Right.
A prime example, if you're in combat, you have your helmet, you have your bulletproof vest with those plates that stop bullets, you have your weapon, you have all your pack and all your gear. Reality is, on a convoy, their trucks are spaced about 100 yards apart. So if you have to, all this body weight, now you have to do the same thing, you have to double it because it's somebody else. If you are unable to carry that person that is wounded, that is unconscious or whatever the case is, you carry that person with that much weight in a timely manner from one truck to the other, then you can't help me in combat. If you can't help me in combat, don't go to combat. Simple as that. If I can't help you in combat, I'm not going there. You're the best person for the best job. These type of requirements, I use the truck as an example, one, because it seems pretty realistic as just a physicality thing. If you can't do that, then you can't do your job. So there's different tests that they have. They actually call the PFT, the physical fitness test, and the CFT, the combat fitness test. These tests we do annually to see if you are still physically up to par to participate in the military. And that's why.
A lot of that has to do with upper torso strength.
Yep. I mean, but strong hips is a strong person. So like, if you can, it doesn't matter how you get the weight up, especially in a life or death situation. So if you aren't able to get it up in any way, no, get it up however you get it up. But that's why School of Infantry is very, very difficult, and why the dropout rate for people who can't hack it, as they call it, is high for that type of thing. That's why the people get kicked out of the military. In my platoon, we started with 34 individuals in boot camp, and we graduated with 24.
Wow.
10 people got, from my platoon alone, got...
That's a third.
Yes.
That's a third, yeah.
We had over half, well, roughly half, somewhere in that 50 percentile range of people from my entire company not graduate with us because of injury, because of illness. We had a guy in my platoon that broke his hand. You have to go repair yourself and then come back to us. If you can perform, you can perform. If you can't, have a nice day. But
well, I remember when they had the draft. Basically, it was basically a 30 percentile of the people who were physically fit and mentally fit for the military, which surprised me that it was a 30% percentile that made it through the Army. With all the faculties and physical faculties, eye, hearing, you know, dexterity and
flat-footedness.
Yeah, exactly.
There was
Did you have bedwetters in basic training?
Yeah, a couple of people did. It's funny you should say that. The first night we were there,
I know, I was in the Army.
The very first night, I'm still in my civilian clothes. They had just given us our camouflage utility uniform that we're supposed to wear, and I put my socks on and the floor's wet, and I look over and the kid next to me had had urinated on himself because he was too afraid to ask to go to the bathroom. And I was not happy because now I had wet pee socks, and now I have to wear this all day because some guy's yelling at you, and now he's yelling at me because I'm next to you. So like this, don't like you now, first day. But he turned out to be a good guy. He made it through boot camp. I haven't seen him since.
Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah, there was people that did that. There was people that would urinate in the middle of the night and they'd wake up halfway through urination because they had a dream about it. Because there's such stress and pressure that you're under, it's hard for your mind to differentiate between reality and
You can get kicked out of the military if you're a bedwetter.
I knew a kid, good guy. He was a big old redheaded ginger. He would wake up with night terrors. He would wake up in the middle of the night and scream, "Yes, sir," and then stand on line, and in his mind, he was dreaming, but in reality, he was in boot camp, and he thought he was still in boot camp, so he never got out of that.
Did you have any suicides?
We had a couple of attempted suicides in our company, but not in my platoon, and those guys got psych eval'd and they got kicked out. That kid.
Well, a lot of people do that in the military just to get out of the military.
Yeah, but when we first got to boot camp. When you first get there, you don't get your drill instructors that you get for the entire time. They give you the receiving ones. And those guys just go into, hey, this is your squad bay. In the urinals for the drill instructors had to rip it down, but they had a plaque of somebody had hand drawn it and they made copies of it, how to cut your wrist. And it was a diagram with a Z.
Wow.
I was like, wow, they're efficient here. You know, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it.
Listen, we have to end this. Why don't you come back and do another half hour with us, okay?
All right.
So, I mean, it was great talking to you.